I was cheated on, framed, and forced out, so I crushed their empire and raised my daughters alone. My bed woke me up to take a nap. I reached over and activated the button. "Sir, there is a lady here who wishes to see you," my secretary said. "She has been dismembered," the machine responded with a voice. "Colette, I'm currently quite busy. Could you please ask Val if she can see her for me?" I replied. "Valerie is my private assistant. Today she handles the majority of my visitors." To be honest, I was not at all busy. I had become a loner and was taking a nap in the afternoon. Colette was aware of this, so disturbing me was rare. "Sir, the lady says it's highly personal and vital, what she has to say. She claims she can only talk with you," Colette persisted. "Tell her she will need to schedule an appointment." "I'm not sure, next week perhaps," I responded. "Sir, the lady thinks it is urgent and is determined," Colette insisted. "Bugger. Okay, good. I guess I should go see her." "Bring her to my office in about 5 minutes," I conceded. I got out of bed, gave my face a short wash in the bathroom to wake myself up, and made my way through the penthouse to my personal office. I gazed out the window to see the vista of the city below. Oh, I despise this bloody place. I despise every single thing about it. I think I despise everyone on the 17 stories below me, even if they all work for me. Colette walked inside the office without knocking. She never knocked anymore because I was seldom in there. Now, I'm just the organization's public face. I was only here in my penthouse room because I had nowhere else to go and nothing to do. Colette was meant to be showing a really nice young lady in. She strode and walked past her into the office in an officious manner. But I believe the unexpected grandeur she found herself in caught her off guard and knocked the wind out of her sails. I could see she was accustomed to being uncomfortable in her surroundings. She was unexpectedly introduced to Mr. John Crawford. She inquired before Colette had time to make her formal introduction. "That is who I am. June Parsons is with Zulu Social Services," she said. "I'm not sure, but I believe her statement was intended to make me feel scared." "And Miss, what can I do for you? Or is it Mrs. June Parsons from Zulu Social Services?" I asked. "Please refer to me as June." "We try not to be too formal," she replied. I could see perplexity on her face. I believe neither I nor the environment she found herself in met her expectations. This woman was used to dealing with people on the opposite side of the financial spectrum, and she seemed completely out of her element here with me. "Everything is okay, June. You may refer to me as JN. What can I do now for you?" I asked kindly. "Pardon me, Colette. That's okay. You are free to leave Miss Parsons with me." "I appreciate it," I said. Colette gave me a questioning glance and a wink as she exited the office, closing the door behind her. Well, my visitor was extremely lovely, and the gold diggers had used some unusual methods to reach me in the past. "Hello, Mr. Crawford. John, I apologize. I work for social services and can tell you," she began. "You've already said it several times." "Please let me know how I can help you," I interrupted. "Where do I begin?" She spoke as she looked around the room. The place's beauty was clearly not what she had expected. "Look, I have a case. There are 2 children involved, as well as a mother who attempted self-deletion. Perhaps you would benefit from reading this note." It was discovered beside the mother. She handed me an envelope that contained simply the note, more like a letter than a note. I sat down in my large swivel chair and opened it. The first line said, "My dearest John." I recognized who it was from right away. My mind flashed back 11 years to when my formerly happy existence came to an abrupt halt. Crap, I remember having a hell of a bloody morning. A water main had burst on Chiswick High Road, causing gridlock as people sought to navigate the restricted route. When I attempted to sneak into my office without being detected, I was about 1.5 hours late. My commute to work had turned into a gory nightmare for the second time that week. When I entered my office, June, my secretary, wasn't actually mine. She looked after perhaps 3 or 4 of us. "John, where have you been, and why have you not turned on your phone?" she asked. "Crap, I must have neglected to charge the wretched device last night," I said. I believed it was becoming a habit of mine. When I came home in the evening, I was too sleepy to think clearly. "Since 9 o'clock, Tony Jordan has been seeking you. He's really agitated about something. You must get your buttocks up there intelligently. They're such jerks," June said. That's all I required. Since his father retired, that arrogant little butthead has been riding high on his screwing horse. That little punk and his brother believed they were God's gift to the bloody industry. He had no notion how to negotiate a deal or keep clients satisfied. I was wondering who the little bugger had irritated now. "Thank God, John, you showed up. I've been looking for you all morning." "You really need to improve your time management skills, you know," Tony Jordan said as I entered his office. "If you hadn't moved the bleeding office from Slough to Chiswick, I wouldn't have had to suffer in bloody traffic jams every morning and evening. You've made up a hole. My mind was working. I was wondering why I didn't have the nerve to say that to the little garbage, but don't we all think this way? I apologize, Tony. There was a water main break on the high road, I said. Okay, I arrived on time. You certainly did, you tiny, I thought. You have an expensive town flat paid for by the firm, a couple of blocks away, where you stay during the bleeding week with that little tart that your missus is unaware of to keep you warm at night. Anyway, something has gone awry with the Johnson job. They are once again late with their deliveries. I need you to go out there and speak some sense into Johnson's board. Pour some oil on the water. They're threatening to take their contract elsewhere. If this happens, not only will heads roll here, but also at the facility. You've tried to sweet-talk Johnson before. I'm confident that you can do it again, Tony said. And why aren't you going too? I considered. While you're at it, take your brother Robert's mound of stuff with you. You're destroying this bloody corporation. If your old guy knew how you two were messing things up here, he'd be turning in his grave. Once more, we believe these things, don't we? I wished I could figure out why I wasn't saying them, but if I did, I'd be out of my depth, wouldn't I? I'm going to call Simon Johnson. I'm sure he'll come around. We've done business with him for years. You're on the 12 o'clock flight, old man. Johnson is retired, and his nephew Paul Johnson has taken over as company chairman. Both Robert and I are unable to travel this week. We both have pretty packed calendars. The flight departs at 12 o'clock, Tony continued. Crap, I won't be able to attend. I need to get home first and pack. In addition, I'm supposed to take Sally to the theater this evening. She's been pleading with me to take her for months, I protested. You'll have to take her some other time. There's no need to worry. You will be reimbursed for the tickets. The play concludes on Saturday night. Sally has been bugging me to take her for weeks, but I've been so preoccupied with putting the Carter contract in order that I haven't gotten home until way too late in the evenings. I believe that now that Carter's contract was completed, my evenings would be free for a few weeks. I know the last night has sold out. Tonight was the only day we could get tickets. If I went to New York, I will not be able to respond until at least Friday. Sally is about to go crazy. Will she then have to go with a friend or something? Sally, more than anyone else, understands that the Johnson work is essential to the organization. It accounts for over half of our total revenue. Call her at the factory and ask her to go home and pack your luggage for you. You will never make it home and back to the airport in time. Proceed from here now. Run. We can't afford to have you miss the flight, Tony insisted. Cheeky little, I thought as I left his office. I assumed that I'd started working for Henry Jordan right out of college. It had only been a minor issue when I first started working here. Jordan & Sons make machine tools. Henry Jordan had gotten in on the ground floor some years before Maggie Thatcher announced that business must stand on its own 2 feet, and the bank began ringing, depleting the company's overdraft of working cash. Numerous British engineering firms went bankrupt. Henry Jordan was one of the vultures that purchased all of the obsolete plant and machinery. He reconditioned it in his own small workshop and sold it for a laughable profit to companies all throughout the developing world. Henry Jordan was a staunch conservative. I believe a large portion of the profits vanished into offshore accounts. It wouldn't be wise for a good Tory to pay too many taxes, right? When bankruptcies began to thin out, Henry Jordan altered the company's operational model. He became an agent for corporations wishing to sell machine tools throughout Europe. It is really quite simple. The machinery was brought into the country in bits, then assembled and delivered to any place in the EEC. The company did well until the 2 boys were old enough to join it. Unfortunately, Henry's 2 sons, who had both attended university, were attempting to operate on the just-in-time premise. Great on a manufacturing line, however, it left no time for troubleshooting the issues that frequently arose in our business. Parts from all over the world may be delayed for 11 reasons. Fortunately, most of our clients were already aware of the issues, but if the brothers had only given us a few days' cushion when they quoted delivery dates, we wouldn't have had half the problems. It was always evident to me. Inform the customer that they can get it in 3 weeks, then inform them that you can deliver 5 days early. They are satisfied. Tell them they can have it in 2 weeks, but it will be delivered a week late, and crap flies. Never promise something you can't keep. I couldn't understand why Tony insisted on me flying to New York. The brothers had recently finalized the new contract with Johnson's. They must be the ones to make things right. Yeah, but I knew how it would appear on the board if everything went wrong. I was the one who was going to take the can on this one. When I returned to my workplace, I contacted Sally's office at the Slough factory. Yeah, Sally worked for Jordan & Sons as well. That was what Tony was hinting at. It wasn't just my head that would roll. I could see Sally going too. Sally and I met when she first joined the typing pool several years ago. There is a typing pool. That should give you an indication of how long ago I'm talking. We seemed to get along well right away, but we didn't get together until the office Christmas party that year. You're familiar with how it feels. Everyone was kissing under the mistletoe. When I kissed Sally, I'm not sure what happened, but someone eventually asked us to relocate because they wanted their chance. Sally and I didn't talk about anything related to the kiss. We were a product, I believe. We both went crazy buying each other Christmas gifts, and I attended her family's Christmas dinner. I believe this caused some uncertainty because I'm quite sure they were expecting another person, but no one said anything. We partied together on New Year's Eve and awoke together in my bed on New Year's Day. That was our first time getting acquainted. I'm sad to say that I don't recall much about it. I do remember the night of January 1st. Sally never returned to her family home. 4 months later, we were married. When I was at home, I had the finest 10 years of my life. My life at work was wonderful until Henry's twin sons graduated university and came to work at the firm. Until they joined, I had been Henry's number 2, his go-to person for all things both above and below the board. The boys' arrival marked a shift. Henry was a kind old man. He did not initially elevate his boys above me in the company hierarchy, but they both seemed to hate it. They were cordial enough to me, but I could see they disliked the influence I wielded over their father. Henry Jordan listed the company on the stock exchange and made a bloody fortune. That was the only time he upset me. I expected him to send a few shares my way, but he didn't. Another thing that did not happen was that I was not appointed as director. I didn't join the board, but both of my brothers joined. Then Henry had his bloody heart attack. In the hospital, he instructed me to keep an eye on the guys. Henry, I have some hopes, I assumed. If you had given me some shares and put me on the board, I would have had some clout with them. Yes, absolutely, that was something I never said to him. He was on his way out, and I could see it. Henry promptly retired and died 3 months later. The lads began making alterations as soon as the lid of his coffin was closed, none of which I considered excellent suggestions. But there was very little I could do about it. They rented new offices in Chiswick, and the majority of the admin and sales staff relocated there. Tony managed that apartment, while Robert seized entire control of the factory. As a result, he inherited Sally as his secretary. She had been the plant manager for a while, but she didn't last long because Robert was constantly on her case. I was not pleased to learn that Sally was working for Robert Jordan. It wasn't something I could pinpoint, but I didn't like how either of the brothers looked at her. Bring it on. It's possible that it was jealousy. Perhaps it was simply because I didn't like either of the brothers, really. But there was something I sensed. Sally was 5 years older than both sons, but she was a very attractive woman, even if I may say so myself. Sally also looked to get along well with Robert. If you ask me, no, I didn't suspect anything was amiss. However, because I disliked the boys, I would occasionally make comments about them. Sally would leap to their defense, and there it was, the recipe for trouble. The reality is, as the company grew busier, I found myself scurrying around all over the place, keeping customers satisfied and negotiating new contracts. I believe Robert saw Sally more than I did, so she knew his side of any problems before they were thrown at me. Okay, back to the Johnson contract and my last-minute trip to the United States. I called Sally and told her the wonderful news. I believe they heard her reaction at the Chelsea football stadium. Yes, I know it deafened me, but you're taking me to a play tonight. You made it a promise. What's going on? Have you agreed to go to New York for the time being? She exclaimed. This was another issue for me. When I was asked to leave somewhere, Sally somehow got the impression that it was something I chose to do. I've never understood why she thought I'd agree to go on these terrible vacations, but from our chats it was clear that she believed I did. I did not sign up to volunteer, Sally. Tony has just instructed me to go. Surely you are aware of the issue with Johnson contract deliveries. Has Robert not told you? There are always issues nowadays, but why do you always have to volunteer to sort things out, especially because we're scheduled to go to the play tonight? I'm tired of the way you've been treating me recently. But what about my play? She continued. Do you see what I'm saying? I only told her that I was being transferred to New York, but she insisted that I had volunteered to go. I'm afraid I became irritated since she wasn't really listening to what I was saying. To be honest, Sally, I don't give a damn about that stupid play. Our jobs are on the line here, and if I can't calm Johnson's bloody board down, the company will be up the creek without a paddle with no orders. Now don't blame me because your factory can't produce this thing on time, I snapped. That's the issue with dividing the two components of the organization. It had devolved into a them versus US mentality. Unfortunately, I was with the US, and Sally was with them. An even more disastrous recipe. Please go home right now, pack that suitcase for me, and meet me at the Heathrow check-in desk at 11 a.m., I said. There was silence on the other end of the phone for several moments. Then, in a very controlled voice, Sally replied, You'll get your bag and maybe a few other things you didn't bargain for. I am not your skivvy, you know." The phone line went dead. What motivated me to do that? Why did I yell at Sally, and why did she yell at me? Darn. When she met me at the airport, I realized I needed to apologize, but it did not occur at 11 a.m. I was waiting at check-in, but Sally was nowhere to be seen. 10 days passed with no trace of her. Sally came just as the girl was going to close the desk. She walked through the departure lounge as if I had all the time in the world. "Darn, what's taking you so long, Sally?" I said, obviously with a strong tone because I was concerned about missing the flight by then. But then I understood it wasn't Sally's or my fault we were having this disagreement. It wasn't either of our faults that she was unhappy in the performance that evening, and it wasn't healthy for us to leave furious with each other. "Sally, I am sorry. I'm just so pumped about this vacation," I said. I went to kiss her, but she backed away. "We don't have time for such things. You must hurry to save your valuable contract," she said. Then I heard the girl at the check-in desk say, "Mr. Parsons, you must check your bag in now, or it will not make it on your flight." When I returned to Sally, I had completed the formalities of checking the suitcase. She was no longer present. "How long does it take until the flight is called?" I inquired with the young lady. "Probably around 30 minutes. However, I recommend that you remain in the departure area," she replied. I dashed in the direction Sally had appeared from, but Sally must have moved much faster when she left than when she arrived. At the end of the concourse was the entrance of an enclosed bridge that led to the short-term parking area. I was halfway across the bridge when I noticed the bright yellow Lamborghini exiting the ground-level car park. Sally's coat was just visible through the passenger side of the windshield. I knew who was in the driver's seat, even though I couldn't see him. Robert Jordan let no one save himself drive his bloody status symbol. I was really pissed. Robert Jordan was too busy to go to New York, but he had time to drive my wife. As I returned to the terminal building, I was really furious. Unlike normal, I walked into the bar and ordered a drink. After sitting there fuming for about 20 minutes, my flight was called, and I spent much of the flight in the departure lounge. I reviewed the contracts as carefully as I could, looking for the loopholes Henry always included. This offered us some freedom in terms of delivery dates and the like, but the boys had attended the most recent contracts. The majority of those modest small doors were closed. On my arrival at JFK, I was greeted by none other than Paul Johnson himself, along with Petra, his personal assistant, whom he had clearly inherited from his uncle, and a small entourage of men I'd already met. The kid, a bit of a misnomer, however. Paul has always resembled the Jordan brothers. My next-door neighbor is really young. I'd only had around 5 years on them. Previously, Simon Johnson had usually done the majority of the talking, with Paul simply being one of the other minions who mystically nodded in agreement to everything Simon said, and, of course, laughed at his jokes. Paul's overzealous welcome set me on edge, as did the group of flunkies he had with him, who brought my bags and laptop to the waiting limo. "We've assigned you to the company suite by the door," Paul explained. "I was expecting to see you during this trip, but the timing is awful. He is still on his global cruise. He told me to let you know that he'd look you up when the ship arrives in Southampton." I recall thinking it was weird for Simon Johnson to want to do this. Yeah, I had always gotten along with the old guy. Henry Jordan and I had met several times in the past. We've been interacting with his company, but I never assumed our friendship was anything more than business. Why on earth would he want to meet me now that he had retired? Over the years, Henry Jordan had consistently remained at the Waldorf Astoria. However, when I visited New York on my own, I preferred to stay in less opulent accommodations. But Paul told me that the suite belonged to the corporation, so I assumed it was just vacant. I couldn't picture the Jordan brothers paying for a suite for me. Paul dropped me off at the Waldorf and told me he'd send Petra to pick me up for supper at 7 o'clock. He and his small entourage then left. Jesus, this excursion was becoming more perplexing by the minute. In theory, I should take or invite Paul Johnson to supper. It was now around 4 p.m. local time. I was wondering if Sally had gone to the theater on her own after all. She already had the tickets. I dialed our home phone number as planned. There wasn't an answer. I assumed it would be around 9 p.m. in London. I texted her, asking if she was enjoying the play and who she had found to attend with. When Petra arrived to pick me up, she discovered me talking on the phone again. I hadn't received a response to my text to Sally, and I assumed she'd been home by then. However, the home phone did not answer this time. I left a message on the answering machine, telling her I was going out to dinner and would contact her the next day. As I went to exit the room, Petra grabbed my briefcase and returned it to the chair. I'd picked it up somewhere. "This is primarily a social occasion, John. Paul invites you to meet his family tonight. He stated it was unfortunate that you did not bring your wife with you," she said. "What is going on, Petra?" I asked her after we got into the car. Petra was thinking about how to respond to my question. It took a few moments for her to respond. Paul simply believes that we should do a lot of business together. You should truly get to know each other. He also wants you to meet everyone on the Johnson's board of directors, she said. None of this made sense to me until I realized that Johnson and Partners would be interested in hiring me away from Jordan and Sons. There was no alternative explanation I could provide for everyone's unusual behavior. The food was superb, with a large number of Johnson's board members present, including their wives. Then we all went to a nightclub where some of the party members danced. I didn't go to the dance floor because I was exhausted after the flight. I'd been awake about 5 hours longer than the rest of them. However, as the evening progressed, I became increasingly sure that my headhunting plan was correct. All of the board members made an effort to talk to me and make me feel welcome. Petra stuck to me like glue, if that makes sense, as if she were my personal assistant. You see what I mean? Whenever someone approached me, she would whisper who they were and tell me everything I needed to know about them. It was about 2 a.m. New York time when I got back to my room, 7 a.m. back home. There were no messages on my mobile, and according to the reception, Sally hadn't left any messages there for me either. I debated calling her but thought it was a little early to do so, as she'd been out late the evening before. I was roused from the sleep of the dead at 11 a.m. by my breakfast noisily arriving, followed by the now ubiquitous Petra. She appeared to be serving as my personal assistant again. At 12 p.m. you will meet with the entire board. It shouldn't take long. Following that, Paul invites you to play a game of golf with him. Do you play? Of course you have. I recall you and Henry interacting with SJ. Anyway, straight after the meeting, you'll fly up to George's mansion from the building's rooftop helipad. Paul wanted to know how eager you are to return to London, she said. That truly relies on what Paul and the board say about our late deliveries. I believe they will appreciate whatever you say. After all, you are it. Anyway, they recognize and trust you. Now get moving, or you'll be late for the meeting, Petra added abruptly, losing her normal self-assurance. She seemed unusually flustered for a minute, and then was in a hurry to leave the room or at least be out of my company for a while. To be honest, I hadn't paid careful attention to what Petra was saying since I was eager to call Sally. I tried calling her factory office, but the switchboard cut me off. The girl stated that Sally was not at the workplace that day. Luckily, the receptionist was a temp and didn't know my voice. When I asked whether she knew why Sally wasn't in, she didn't ask who I was. She said she had no idea. I don't understand why, maybe it was a sixth sense, but something compelled me to ask her to put me in touch with Robert Jordan. She informed me that he was also absent from the office that day. I'm outraged. I tried calling my home number again, but it was not answered. Then I called Sally's phone, which was turned off. Robert's phone was also shut off. By then, I had gotten completely out of my pram. I contacted Tony Jordan at the Chiswick office. When he got on the line, I demanded to know where the devil Robert was. I told Tony there was something in the contract that I needed Robert to explain for me. It struck me that Tony took a bit longer than necessary to respond. I assume Robert has traveled to Brighton. He is meeting with Carter's industry directors today. I believe he stated he was going to bring Sally along to take notes. You're familiar with Tony's recollection, he said. You made a poor decision, you lying little loser, I thought. I closed that terrible contract last week. It's signed, sealed, and delivered. What kind of nonsense are you attempting to feed me here? Yet again, it was just a thought, not a statement. When Tony asked how things were doing, I told him I'd probably have to stay for a few more days to calm them down. As soon as I got off the phone with Tony, I called Monty Carter's secretary in Brighton. As planned, she confirmed that Robert and her boss had no scheduled meetings that day. In fact, she could not recall their ever meeting. Petra reappeared and pushed me to hurry up and get ready for the conference, so I threw the rest of my meal down my throat and ran into the shower. We arrived late, but no one seemed to notice. An incredible round of introductions ensued, followed by a tour of the premises. We didn't get into the meeting room until about 1 o'clock. My negotiations were a complete farce, I must admit. Everyone agreed with whatever I stated, and they seemed to be more concerned about whether I was offended about anything. I gathered that everyone agreed with me that the Jordan brothers were jerks and a waste of space. However, that was not expressed in words. By that point, I was convinced that they were going to make me an offer I couldn't refuse. I was startled when the offer didn't come through. When the conference ended, Paul and I, along with a couple of other directors, went up to the roof to board the helicopter. Petra, as expected, joined us. She inquired when I wanted to return to England and arranged me a flight later that day. On the golf course, I called my secretary in Chiswick on my cell phone and informed her that I would be staying for a few days. Whatever was going on back there, I wanted everyone to assume I was leaving the country for a few days. Nevertheless, Petra must have overheard our chat. I apologize for being overly curious, John, but is something wrong? I had to inquire because I couldn't stop noticing. "Are you worried every time you call England?" she inquired, sounding anxious. "I'm not sure, but I believe something is not right over there. However, I am afraid it is personal," I replied. "John, we've known each other for a long time. Can I help you? You are already aware of this." "I am aware of my ability to remain inconspicuous," she offered. "Okay, you could assist me. It would be ideal if no one found out that I'm traveling home this evening, no one in England at least. If what I fear is happening, I would like to try to catch them in the act," I said. "God, you do not think your wife is," she began. "I'm not sure, Petra, but we had a disagreement before I left, and she hasn't been where I expected her to be when I've tried calling her. I can't get her on the phone either. It's possible she's still furious with me, but there's a man I can't get in touch with either. Someone else over there is lying to me." "There had to be a reason for that," I explained. "I see why you are in such a hurry to return. Look, if somebody in England calls you, I'll have them transferred to me. Other than Paul, I am the only one who knows you're taking the plane this evening. Anyway, all of Paul's calls are routed through me, so anyone attempting to contact you will be blocked. You can call them back from your cell phone, and they won't know where you are," she assured me. "Thank you, Petra. Now I think I should get back to the game," I said. While I was conversing with Petra, I'd noticed Paul start walking towards us. I had moved out of earshot to make my phone calls. What perplexed me was the fact that, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Petra make a small gesture with her hand as Paul began to move in our direction. Paul immediately changed direction and engaged in conversation with the other two players. "The game is over." We went to George's mansion for a meal, where I met PSG's daughter Beatrice. Once again I sensed something was wrong. I won't be for years, but she appeared uncomfortable around me that day. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had the feeling these people knew something I didn't. I started to wonder if I had made a mistake in telling Petra about my suspicions. We flew back to the company headquarters later that day in a helicopter. Then Petra took me to the airport. She had arranged for someone to pick up my gear from the waiting area. The flight back to Heathrow was uneventful until I landed. A steward greeted me in the arrivals lounge and informed me that there was an urgent phone call for me, directing me to a service phone. "John, this is Petra. We got everyone on the phone for you last night after you left. Your wife called, and I informed her that you were in conference with Paul. Later, both Johnsons called, but separately, and I gave them the same message. Your wife then called again, asking if I knew when you would return home. I told her I had you booked on the Saturday evening flight. Was that okay?" she said. "Thank you, Petra. That should be okay. I'll call them later on my mobile and tell them the same story." "Thank you for your help," I replied. "Stay in touch, John. I'll let you know if they call again," she said. So, my loving wife reappeared, showing signs of concern about my whereabouts. I wondered why she was suddenly concerned about me. I checked into the Novotel by the airport and discovered that Hertz had already delivered the car I had ordered from New York. I, or rather the company, had an account with Hertz, so that was the simplest option, but the car was reserved for me privately. Not feeling tired, I drove past my house. Sally's car was in the driveway, and the house was dark as expected. Since it was just after 4 a.m. from the call box on the corner of our street, I called the house phone. There was no response, and the answering machine was picked up. I made 4 calls in a row, and when she didn't answer any of them, I assumed Sally wasn't in the house, so the car remained where it was. I went down to the house and entered quietly. A quick search of the location revealed that it was deserted. What do I do now? I asked myself. Well, the best idea I could think of was to sit down and wait for Sally to return. I made myself a pot of coffee and settled into the lounge. I had planned on the coffee keeping me awake, but it did not. Just before 8 a.m., the noise of the Lamborghini's exhaust woke me up. Through the window, I watched Sally and Robert exit the yellow Peril and walk up to the house. It will not take me long to shower and change. Will you go into the kitchen and make some coffee? I need something to clear my mind, Sally said. It was amazing they didn't notice me sitting in the lounge, despite the fact that the door was open. I suppose some people don't notice what they don't expect to see. Sally dashed up the stairs and Robert entered the kitchen. I heard him go through all of the cupboards. Then he came out and called up the stairs. Sally, where do you store your coffee? Her kettle, Sally, is on the side. She called back to him. Well, I can't find it. He called back to her. I heard Sally return down the stairs. She entered the kitchen and said, You men are useless without a good woman to look after you. That's funny. It should be to the side there. I don't believe I left it in the... My God, what are you doing here? Sally had come into the lounge, looking for the coffee percolator after failing to locate it in the kitchen, and she had finally spotted me. She stood there in a skimpy bra and thong which I had never seen before. I was just sitting here waiting for my faithful wife to return, and now I think I'll kick a slimy little jerk's teeth down his throat for him, I said as I got up from my chair. Robert and Sally appeared to be glued to the spot in shock for a moment, After all, they both knew I was still in the United States. Then Robert regained his composure and attempted to flee. Unfortunately for him, we had an unusual and complicated night latch on our front door. The darn lever on the thing turns in the wrong direction. The more he tugged and pulled on it, the more panicked he became. I slammed him against the door and punched the crap out of him. I don't think the little wanker knew how to defend himself. Sally was screaming at me that it wasn't what it seemed and trying to pull me away from Robert. I don't think I knocked him nearly as hard as I would have liked, to be honest. I am not an inherently violent person, so when he attempted to roll into a ball on the floor, I stopped hitting him. I believe some people would have used the opportunity to kick the crap out of him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I opened the door and shoved him outside after turning the latch in the proper direction. Then, without thinking, I grabbed Sally and pushed her out as well, slamming the door shut. I returned to the lounge, only this time I went to the liquor cabinet. Sally banged on the door and rang the doorbell for a short time. Through the lounge window, I saw Robert, who had retreated to his car, emerge again, carrying a travel blanket that I assumed was to cover Sally's almost bare body. Sally called through the postbox once more, saying that it wasn't what it appeared to be, and begging me to let her back in. I was adamant about not getting into a shouting match with her, so I ignored her. Some of the neighbors had taken an interest in our small cabaret by that point. I could see them watching from their front doors and gardens. Sally, I assume, realized I was back in the lounge when she changed her target and began banging on one of the lounge windows, still screaming at me to let her inside. Unfortunately for her, she must have struck the window too hard. Just as the police arrived, the window pane shattered, and Sally cut her arm badly on the shards. It seemed like only a few moments passed before the paramedics and ambulance arrived. I assumed the cops summoned them. Then a police officer knocked on my door. I'd seen him talk to Sally and Robert before he did this. "Good morning, sir. Would you mind telling me your side of this little debacle?" he asked. "I caught my wife with a loser." "Do I need to say anything else?" I replied. "Not really, sir, but the man claims you hit him," he said. "I did, won't you?" "He was inside my house," I said. "And you didn't hit your wife?" he asked. "No, I really didn't. I just helped her get through the door so she could be with her boyfriend." "I believed I was being quite magnanimous," I said. Another officer who had been talking to Sally and Robert approached, shaking his head at the first officer. "He does not want to take it anywhere, and the lady claims there was no violence directed at her," he said. Then he said to me, "Sir, your wife has a nasty gash on her arm. The medic says she'll need stitches in it, so they'll take her to casualty, but she will need some clothes. Will you take them down there for her?" "Not for your bloody life, I will not. That is her bleeding problem, not mine anymore. Let her little boyfriend get her some new ones." "He has plenty of money," I replied. "Look, I see you recognize that she must have some clothes. She cannot walk around dressed like that." "She's almost bare," the officer said. "Then she'll have to find another mug to come in and get them for her." "Right, you can go up and get some if you want. Or maybe her boyfriend wants to come back in for another round," I said. My attention was drawn to the Lamborghini's burble as it drove away, following the ambulance. It appears she has decided to do without. "Now, if you'll excuse me, officers, I need to call the window people and my solicitor," I said. The police officer left, mumbling something about hoping they wouldn't be called back later in the day. I called the window people, and a man arrived within a few minutes to replace the broken glass. He attempted to make small talk while working, but they soon gathered I was not in a conversational mood. My solicitor referred me to a colleague who handled divorces at their practice. She told me she started the process but couldn't do much until we found out who Sally was acting for. Everything depended on how Sally wanted to play things. I noticed the police drive by several times during the morning while I was stacking all of Sally's clothes in the garage, which I had placed in bin liners. I'm assuming there was some sort of collusion between the police and Sally. They must have informed Sally that I had put her belongings in the garage because around 4 in the afternoon, a different police car arrived outside the house with only one officer inside this time. He did not get out. A little later, a Ford Transit van driven by one of the factory boys came down the road and backed into my driveway. With the remote control, I opened the garage shutter. It was obvious to me what they had come for. Sally, her arm in a sling, exited the passenger door alongside one of the girls from her office. While the guy and the girl loaded Sally's belongings into the van, I heard Sally try the service door between the garage and the kitchen, which was locked. She came around and pressed the front doorbell. John, I need to talk to you. You have it all wrong." Nothing happened between Robert and myself. "John, do you hear me? I know you are in there. Speak with me, John, please. Let's talk about this, please. You are making a terrible mistake," Sally called through the postbox. I opened the door, but before she could say anything else, I stuffed her bag into her hand and slammed it shut again. I had already removed her credit cards and house keys from it. I watched as Sally approached and spoke with the police officer, who got out of his car. He continued shrugging his shoulders and shaking his head. After a while, and with a resigned expression on his face, he pointed to a spot on the ground, presumably telling Sally and her friends to wait. Then he approached and knocked on the door. "Sir, your wife wishes to speak with you, and you understand that you cannot keep her out of the marital home," he said when I opened it. "You can inform her that we have nothing to discuss. The house is already on the market because she decided it was no longer our marital home. If it was, she would have been in it when I returned home last night instead of screwing her boyfriend somewhere else, wouldn't she? Have her lawyer contact mine, will you?" "She is aware of my identity," I said. The officer returned down the drive, where he had a brief but animated conversation with Sally and her friends. Sally then collapsed into the arms of her two friends, who assisted her back into the van. Then they drove off. The police officer stood there, shaking his head as he watched the garage shutter slowly close and shrugged at one of the neighbors who had been watching the pantomime. He got back into his car and drove away. About an hour later, Petra called me. I told her about the events of the day, and she apologized. She asked what I planned to do, and I told her about the divorce, Sally, and of course, I wouldn't be able to continue working for Jordan's. Petra insisted that I keep in touch with her and made me promise to do so. She also mentioned that Simon Johnson was going to call, and that I needed to stay in touch so he could find me. Paul had already told me that. I was curious as to why Simon Johnson's visit was so important. It was midnight when I returned to the Novotel. I couldn't sleep in that house again. It had too many memories. After breakfast the next morning, I called my secretary, June, and asked if Tony was available. She informed me that he was not going to be in the office that day and asked what was going on. Well, I told her straight away. June was extremely upset by the news. I swear she was crying when I told her. She informed me that Tony had told her I was likely to resign when I returned. She got the impression that he'd avoided the office that day. When I arrived, I found Tony's absence strange. I would have assumed that after knocking his brother around, he would have taken great pleasure in firing me. After all, Robert is one of the company's directors, so there was no love lost between us. Nothing was really making sense. None of this made sense. First, I took a trip to New York. Tony insisted that I go, but when I arrived, everyone at Johnson seemed surprised that I had come. Yes, there were some late deliveries, but they didn't seem to be climbing the walls over them. Then, there was Robert going after Sally. Yes, she's an attractive woman, but Robert was a bit of a lad when it came to women, and he always seemed to have a little dolly bird on his arm. Sally was at least 5 years older than he was, and nearly 10 years older than his typical tart. I do not know. I suppose they might have fallen in love. They did spend a significant portion of their working lives together, but I doubt Robert would have done so. I went into the office to collect my personal belongings. I used the opportunity to wipe the hard drive on both my company computer and the laptop I was carrying, but not before copying the contents of hard drives to zip drives. I personally delivered my resignation letter, which June had prepared for me, to the personnel officer. While I stood there waiting, he arranged for my final salary and bonuses to be deposited into my bank account immediately. The accounts department was hesitant at first, that is, until they realized who was resigning. I believe nearly the entire staff assisted me in carrying my gear down to the rental car, or came out to wave me off. I had left my company car safely locked in the garage back at the house. I wanted to make sure I had received everything I was owed before giving it back. That was it, really. I stayed in the Novotel for about a week before finding a flat that I liked. The house sold quickly. It was in a good area, and I priced it to sell quickly. Well, I decided to take a few months off and think about my next move. To be honest, I was still expecting Johnson's to make me an offer and didn't want to commit elsewhere too soon. Sally, I saw her a few times. On both occasions, we had heated disagreements. Correction, on both occasions, I called her a cheating little 304, and she retaliated. Civil discussions between us appeared impossible. I was surprised she didn't shake hands with Robert right away. She didn't move in with him for several months after I kicked her out of the house. Where she'd been staying in the meantime, I'm not sure, but the guy I hired to watch her said she moved in with Robert shortly after our first major disagreement at the solicitors. They nearly had to call the cops for that one. She probably realized at that meeting that we were never going to get back together. Our second battle of words occurred when we signed the divorce papers. Sally, looking strange, was sitting at the table before I entered the room. She wore a large winter coat and sat strangely. My solicitor and I sat opposite each other while the settlement details were read aloud. Then Sally signed the documents. They were placed in front of me, and as I approached to sign, Sally asked, "John, are you certain you want to do this? There are some things you really must—" "Did you hear any cheating, lying little 304 say something, Sandra?" I consulted my solicitor. Sally went off on me, calling me all kinds of names, so I quickly signed the forms and exited the room without saying another word. As I previously stated, I did not need or wish to engage in a slanging match with her. It had been a few weeks, perhaps a month, since the divorce was finalized. Petra called to inform me that Simon Johnson would be arriving in Southampton that weekend. I arranged to meet him at a hotel in town. After the awkward formalities were completed, Simon and his wife spoke with me about their cruise for a while. Once again, I had the impression he was up to something. Look, the guy was just a client I had known for years, but he was acting like a long-lost friend. We went through the condolences section for Henry's death, and he said he was very sorry to hear about what happened between Sally and me. Then he apologized profusely. He couldn't have acted sooner, but he had to follow Henry's instructions. That statement indicated to me that he had been evasive. That all ended when we entered the room. She said hello and gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek, as usual. Then she handed Simon the briefcase she was carrying. I and Simon's wife then left the room before he opened it. Right, John, let us get down to business. Tell me what you thought when Henry floated the company but did not give you any shares, he suddenly inquired. I really didn't know how to respond. Well, it was his company, and he could do whatever he wanted with the money, I said. But you helped him build it. From what I know of Henry, I'm guessing you've gone out on a limb for him more than once, he pressed. I didn't respond to that. I figured he'd get to the bottom of it all before too long. Did you know Henry also owned a large portion of Johnson's through offshore holding companies? Those same companies also own a sizable portion of Jordan's shares, he continued. This was news to me, but I decided it was best if I kept my mouth shut and listened to Simon. Tell me, what did Henry tell you when he retired? He realized he didn't have long to live. He asked me to try and keep his boys under control, but since I was not on the board, there was little chance of me doing so. Yes, I apologize for having to tell you he did it on purpose. He expected the boys to bankrupt the company within a year or so, and he did not want your name on the paperwork. He expected them to try to shift the blame on you. You are aware that if a company goes bankrupt due to mismanagement of its funds, the directors may be barred from holding other directorships, correct? Anyway, he expected the boys to bleed the company dry before long. Now these papers make you the primary shareholder in those holding companies. Essentially, they are yours, Simon said, placing a stack of papers on the table containing the details of all Henry's numbered bank accounts. I was supposed to keep all of this until Jordan and Sons went down the tubes, but given what the brothers did to you, I believe you should have them now. Did you know that under the terms of their father's will, the brothers could not fire you? I see you haven't. I believe the scum sucker set you up so you would resign, he said, sitting back and gazing at me. You know, John, you're a very wealthy man now, but all of your money is in offshore accounts, so you'll need to figure out how to legally bring it back into the country. I can show you some tricks there. I have some very inventive accountants, he added. My thoughts were going in circles. He simply told me that Robert Jordan had seduced Sally and ruined my life for the sole purpose of getting me out of the firm. But why, I asked. You appear angry, John, and I do not blame you. Look, Henry never believed the boys were truly his. Martha had affairs while Henry was away at work. He had DNA tests done a few years ago, and for a while he believed he was their father, even though they weren't his sons. But he came to believe they knew he wasn't their biological father. He found out they said some very negative things about him behind his back. Henry always said you were more like a son to him, so he decided you would receive all of his money. He assumed the boys would devastate the firm. I believe he wants them bankrupt and penniless, as I assume you do as well, Simon explained. But what about Jordan's staff? Everyone will lose their jobs, I said. No, not if a large American company picks up the pieces. Do you get Henry's little game now, John? Johnson's plans to cancel its contracts with Jordan's within the next week or so. Then, the next day, one or two of Jordan's offshore stockholders will sell a large number of shares on the London Stock Exchange. That should kill the stock price. A hint will be given to the appropriate bank directors, who will call in the company's loans. Then a consortium will step in to buy the company's remaining assets from the banks. I'll let you guess who will lead that consortium and be the main shareholder. That part, however, will remain unknown. You will, of course, renegotiate your contracts with Johnson's. Hey, perhaps one day you'll invite me to join your board of directors. If Johnson's and Jordan's merge, you will also be appointed to Johnson's board of directors. How does that sound to you, John? He asked. I do not understand. Why didn't Henry just leave the company to me from the beginning? I asked. And you'd be fighting their will-related challenges for the next 20 years. You were with Henry almost every day of his working life for the past few years. Henry has always been a little eccentric. He was certain that the family would claim you had undue influence over him. They were certain he had money hidden somewhere abroad. They've spent a lot of money in recent years looking for it. That is why Henry delegated responsibility for everything to me. Anyone looking into where your money comes from will discover that it comes from me. And because I am no longer connected to Johnson & Partners, they cannot accuse us of insider trading. Of course, I have been on that bloody ship for the past 6 months, so there we are, he concluded. I am now the joint chairman of Simon Johnson Associates. I leave Paul to run the American branch while I keep an eye on what's going on in Europe. Both Jordans were declared bankrupt and are barred from serving as directors of any company for a decade. They attempted to set things up a few times, but I had guys keeping a close eye on them. Surprising to me, Robert married Sally. I'm not sure, but I believe he expected Sally to get her hands on some of the money he suspected was on its way to me. But he had no chance because it had officially become mine after Sally and I divorced and after they married. I petitioned the court to terminate her alimony arrangements. Following that, they received nothing from me. The marriage only lasted about a year. I have to be honest. I felt sorry for the twins Sally had with him. I suppose they were getting together in the office for love after I kicked her out, as the guy I was watching Sally claimed they rarely met in the evenings. I doubt the scumbag ever paid her maintenance after he abandoned her. You know, these things cross your mind. I wondered how long Robert had been screwing Sally over his desk, but she must have become pregnant soon after we separated. I saw her pushing a pram down Slow High Road just a year after I kicked her out. Robert was last heard from in southern Spain, where he was being investigated by the drug squad. Southern Spain, Morocco. I imagine a fast boat wouldn't be far away. That was how Robert's mind was functioning. That's why I informed the drug squad. As for Tony, apparently, he drives buses around London. Not the best place to drive a bus. His wife divorced him after learning about his little flatmate. No prizes for guessing who gave her that information. And of course, Tony lives with his mother, Martha. Do I feel guilty about Martha's loss of income from Jordan and Sons? So the question should really be, did Martha feel guilty about running around on Henry? You tend to reap what you sow. Sally, the last I heard, was living in a council flat and receiving social benefits. I should imagine, I do not know, perhaps she is hooking on the side. Sorry, that was uncalled for, but this is how I feel. Once we got started, things moved quickly. Paul and I worked extremely well together. Well, we were both trained by experts. Henry Jordan trained me, and Simon Johnson trained Paul. Over the next few years, we devoured other companies wholesale. The merger of the two companies had resulted in a large multinational. Paul and I have taken a step back and allowed the minions to do the majority of the worrying. Simon Johnson and his wife settled in England. He has a nice estate next to mine. His daughter Beatrice and I occasionally hang out together. No, we aren't interested in getting married and have no plans to. We have both been down that road once. He's on the board alongside Paul and me, and, of course, Petra. We all get along just fine. So, Petra, what were you expecting? Paul's wife died in a car accident some years ago. After a long period of ambiguity, he married Petra. Paul claims that she married him because she was tired of waiting for me to ask her. So why am I living in this penthouse on my own? Well, something has been missing in my life since, you know when. I was living day to day. If an opportunity to make a profit on the market arises, I will seize it. But there must be more to life than making money. Okay, now this social worker is handing me a letter from Sally. I read it quickly and then pressed the intercom button on my desk. Colette, could you please find out if Beatrice is in the building and ask her to come up here as soon as possible? I asked. Yes, sir. I think she's in her office. I saw her earlier and she hasn't gone out since, Colette replied. She was at my door just a few minutes later and entered the room. I handed her the letter, saying nothing. As we read it, she took a few deep breaths, which told me that the contents had made her angry. The vicious, vengeful little witch. Did you have any ideas? She asked. Not in the slightest. What are you planning to do? I replied. Come on, Beatrice, I have no choice in this matter. Turning to June Parsons, I inquired, what hospital is Sally in, and what is the prognosis? You remember when I was there last evening, they had no idea. She had taken a cocktail of drugs, almost everything she had in her house. They pumped her out, but they don't know how long she was lying there. The doctor told me it would take some time before they had any real idea. About the children, I placed them with an emergency foster mother last night. She will look after them today. I thought I'd ask what you wanted to do. I need to take that note back. If she does not survive, the coroner will investigate, June explained. Not a problem. Run a copy for me, Beatrice, and then return the original to Miss Parsons here. Colette will contact Slough Hospital's general manager as soon as possible, and the intercom will be operational again shortly, I said. The telephone rang. Hello, yes, good. Do you know who I am? I have a question for you. How much has your hospital overspent this year? Okay, here is the deal. You have a patient in there named Sally. Sorry, June, what does Sally use? I asked. It is the same as your name, Crawford. June Parsons responded. That was surprising, right? You have a patient named Sally Crawford, a drug overdose case. If she survives, your hospital will receive a £1 million check from me. If she dies, you get nothing. You understand? Good. I don't want any corners cut. No expense was spared. Goodbye, I said. Surely they're doing everything they can, Beatrice commented. I don't trust the bloody bureaucrats who run our hospitals these days. You hear a lot about how they try to cut corners. I just wonder sometimes. Anyway, flashing £1 million at them can't hurt, and I'm confident that everything will be done to help Sally. Now, right now, let's go collect my kids. I assume that's why you came here in the first place, June, I said. Mrs. Crawford claims that they are your children in her letter. I don't see any harm in delegating their care to you for the time being, but you understand that until a judge orders otherwise, they are my responsibility, June replied. You don't need to worry. They'll be in good hands, and you can count on me to keep you informed of what is going on with them. With your permission, we'll drive them to my house near Swindon. There should be plenty to keep them entertained until we find out how Sally is going to be. We can travel up the motorway in about an hour to see her in the hospital, I said. I'm glad you were thinking that way, Mr. Crawford, June said. Come on, we began this conversation with JN and June. I'm sure the kids will be more relaxed if we keep it that way, I replied. The three of us made our way to the basement parking lot. Miss Parsons joined Beatrice and me in the back of my limo for the ride to Slough. We stopped at the hospital first to check on Sally. The doctors weren't too willing to commit themselves at what they termed as this early stage. Then June Parsons guided us to the foster home where the children were staying. Beatrice and I stayed in the car while she went in to speak to the children alone first. 10 minutes later, she signaled for me to join her. I followed her inside. Kay and Heather, this is your Uncle John. He's going to look after you until your mother is feeling better, June told them. We decided on the Uncle John bit until we knew how Sally was going to be and how the girls were going to take to me. Hi, girls. This is my friend Beatrice. You can call her Annie, I said. The two 10-year-olds were eyeing both Beatrice and myself with some suspicion. Until your mommy gets better, you are going to stay with your Uncle John at his home in the country. I think you'll like it there. He has horses you can ride, and the house has its own swimming pool, Beatrice added. Where is our mother? Can we see her? Is she going to die? Heather asked. Well, the doctors are doing their best to prevent that from happening, I volunteered. The girls were still looking distrustful. We saw her a little while ago, but if you wish, we can stop at the hospital, and you can see how hard they are working to make her well again, I said. They might not let the children in to see her, June pointed out. They'll let these children in to see their mother, I assure you. Remember those pound signs, I replied. We dropped June off at the station where she left her car when she traveled up to town to see me. Then we went on to the hospital. As I expected, the rules were bent to allow the girls into the ICU. The girls didn't cry as I'd expected them to do. Actually, they were a couple of tough little cookies, and Beatrice pointed out there was a distinct family resemblance to myself. At that point, I decided to forget about the DNA tests I had planned. The run down to Wiltshire was pretty quiet. Once they began to feel at home in the limo, the girls played with just about everything. The idea that you could watch TV whilst traveling down the motorway was novel to them. It was as we turned off the motorway that Heather turned to me and asked, "You're our father, aren't you?" I could see no point in denying it. Yes, I believe I am, but I have to tell you, I was unaware of that fact until today. If I had been, you would have seen a lot of me, I said. We know. Mommy told us last week that she didn't tell you about us. We didn't know what she was planning to do, but she told us she had been very nasty to you and didn't tell you that you were our father. She said you believed her other husband was our dad, Heather continued. She was crying, Kay added. That is true. Perhaps one day your mother will explain why she did what she did, I said. Do you think she's going to get better? Kay asked. Well, I certainly hope so, I replied. She doesn't want to get better. She wants to go to heaven, Heather said. I can't believe that with two wonderful children like you, Beatrice replied. Mommy's tired. She works so hard and there's never enough money, Heather said. Well, there is going to be now, and she definitely won't be working anymore. See that little house? I said as the car was just entering the grounds of my estate. When she gets better, I'm going to ask your mother if she would like to live in that house. You two will be able to ride horses here and swim in the pool up at the big house. The two girls' eyes were open wide as they stared at the mansion. The car had stopped in front of the house. Staff came rushing down the steps to meet them. I knew that hurried preparations had been made for the girls' arrival. One of the guest rooms with twin beds had been made ready for them. I think Beatrice and I were forgotten as the house staff fussed around the girls and whisked them away. Well, that's a turn up for the books, Beatrice said. I wonder why she didn't tell you they were yours. Sally must have laid on quite a subterfuge to hide the fact from me that she was pregnant. You know, now I think about it, I think she must have been showing at that last meeting we had when we signed the divorce papers. As I remember, she was sitting at that table all kind of hunched over, and she had a long coat on. I can remember thinking it was a very strange thing to wear on a nice day like that. I wonder why she hated me that much. After all, it was her that cheated on me. How else did she expect me to react when I found out she was sleeping with that loser? I mused. You'll have to ask her that, supposing she survives, Beatrice said. The children settled in very well, I thought, getting fussed over by the house staff. They seemed to enjoy it a lot. Every night, I would tuck them up in bed and tell them a little more about their mothers and my life together. I stopped short of the last year. It was 2 weeks later that I entered the room where Sally was sleeping. She'd woken in a conscious condition for the first time the evening before. I placed the letter she had left in her hand and waited for her to wake up. I suppose I must have dozed while I waited. "Hello, John. I apologize," was the first thing I heard her say. I looked over at her and saw she was staring at the letter in her hand. "How are my girls?" she asked. "They're fine. I left them in the swimming pool this morning. I can tell you they are wearing my staff out. They are 2 lovely girls, a real credit to you. Beatrice is going to bring them here this afternoon," I said. "Thank you. I'm sorry I hid them from you. It was a silly thing that I did in anger, but once it was done, I couldn't think of a way to reverse it," she said. "Well, I couldn't think of a worse way than the one you chose," I replied. "I'm sorry, but I was desperate. You know, I owe thousands of pounds that I just can't pay back. Robert left me with so many debts. He had me sign for everything. I think that's why he married me. Because he, as a bankrupt, couldn't get any credit," she explained. "You have no debts now, Sally. I've cleared them all, and those sharks that you borrowed from are now out of business permanently," I said. "You found out about them?" she asked. "That wasn't hard to do. They turned up at your flat demanding money, whilst one of my staff was collecting the rest of the girls' things. He told them to come later, and, well, I think they got a bit of a surprise when they did. Rest assured, they are never going to bother you again," I assured her. "Why are you being so nice to me? The last time you saw me, she began. "That was a long time ago, Sally, and I was still hurting then. Now it's just an unhappy memory. Mind, I hurt a lot when I read your letter. I'm going to take a long time forgiving you for keeping my girls from me," I said. "I'm sorry. That's all I can say," she replied. "Well, as far as the girls know, we are friends now. Tomorrow, if you agree, you're going to be moved to my house. I've got a couple of nurses lined up to look after you there. When you fully recover, you and the girls can live in one of the estate houses. That way, I can see them often," I said. "You're not going to take the children from me?" she asked. "I'm not going to take their mother away from my girls. Now they love you, possibly more than I did once, but I'll make sure you never take them away from me again," I said. "I apologize. That's all I keep saying, but I am truly sorry for all the stupid things I've done." "There's one question that I've got to ask you, Sally. Why did you go with that bleeding creep in the first place?" I asked. "Don't you think that's a question I've asked myself 1,000 times over the last 10 years? I'm not sure I have an answer. He worked on me very carefully over a long time. I know why he set out to do it. He told me when he realized the girls weren't his. That didn't take him long. They look so much like you. He said they couldn't sack you, something to do with their father's will. They were convinced that you had some of their father's money. They thought when you didn't have a job, you would use some of it to, I don't know, start a business of your own, I suppose. They had private detectives watching you all the time. Were they pissed off when you went to Southampton and met up with Simon Johnson? Then a week later, the company's 4 biggest contracts were cancelled, Johnson's amongst them. But you knew that was going to happen, didn't you? I think the bank foreclosing on them really took them by surprise. They hadn't expected that one. The next thing was the police turning up at the house. Did you know that Robert charged just about everything to the company? We had nothing, no house, car, or anything. Robert and Tony were arrested for misuse of company funds. But I suspect you were behind all that," she said. "No, Sally, the forces of law moved along their own paths without any help from me. But Robert and Tony were on ridiculous salaries. What did they do with all their money?" I asked. "I'm not sure. They both liked to play the stock market, and Robert threw money like water in the clubs. He wasn't averse to a little gambling as well. I think they'd squandered it all. When they came up with the idea of getting you out of the firm, they planned on you revealing where all the money was that they were convinced Henry had squirreled away," she explained. "You still haven't explained why you went with the loser," I pressed. "Well, I was angry with you, you know. Robert was very clever. He pulled the wool over my eyes. Every time you went away, he'd make little comments. He'd let me overhear conversations that led me to believe you had girlfriends all over the place. It's hard to explain, but I'd hear him discussing with Tony expenses you'd put through for nightclubs and things. I'm sure they were legitimate expenses, but it was the little asides he'd say to Tony on the phone that I wasn't supposed to hear, but, of course, he made sure I did. You know, man talk. He'd say things like you had a new girl in New York or Rome, and you'd spend a lot of money entertaining her. They had me convinced that when any trips came up, you wanted to go and meet up with your girlfriends, she said. But if you thought I was running around on you, why didn't you challenge me, I asked. Because I couldn't bring myself to believe it. If I challenged you and you said it was true, what was I going to do then? I wasn't strong like you were. I don't think I could have walked away and divorced you. I have been living in misery, but as time went on, I was beginning to waver in that belief. And then that play came up. You knew I wanted you to take me to it. Well, Robert was sitting there when you called and said you were going to New York. He heard our conversation and I was crying, so he comforted me. Then he drove me home so I could get your bag and then to the airport. We didn't go back to work. Robert said I was too upset. We went down to the river at Sunnydale and sat there talking all afternoon. After that, he took me for a meal and to the play that night. I think I must have had too much to drink. I know it's no excuse, but that night I went to bed with him. I'm sure I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't drunk so much. But that's easy to say now, isn't it? I was feeling very low when Robert made me feel good about myself that day. After all, my so-called loving husband had just flown off to meet his girlfriend. Well, so I thought, she continued. I still thought that until Robert walked out on me. He told me everything about how they set it up. If you hadn't come home that day, they had photographs of Robert and me together. They were going to send them to you anonymously. I knew it was wrong to sleep with Robert, and if it's any consolation to you, he was not very good in bed. Too selfish, she said. I don't want to know that, Sally, I interrupted. I'm sorry, but he was useless at just about everything except hitting me. He got quite good at that towards the end. When you came back and found Robert and me together, I was angry. I'm not sure why, but I felt you set me up. That bloody girl told me you weren't coming home until Sunday. That bloody little tart, yes, Petra. I was sure she was your bit of stuff over there. Well, she wasn't. Don't you think I realize that now? But I thought you set me up so that you could catch me and divorce me. That made me really angry. I suppose I was angry with myself, really, she admitted. I was going to tell you about the twins the day we signed the divorce papers. I had it planned. I'd sign the papers, and then before you signed, I'd tell you about the babies. That way, it wouldn't be as if I was using them to get you to change your mind and take me back. You'd have had the choice whether to sign them or not. But you were still angry with me. You know, I think that's when I really should have realized that you hadn't been cheating on me. If you had, you surely wouldn't have been so angry with me for doing the same thing. No. You called me a bloody 304 something, and I lost my temper, she said. I apologize. For God's sake, stop saying you're sorry. What's done is done, and nothing can change it, I said. Will you ever forgive me? She asked. Forgive you? Now, that's a question. Possibly I might forgive you eventually, but there is no way I'm ever going to forget. But there are two lovely young ladies in this equation now, and I, or rather we, have to think of them. I will be civil to you at all times, and I expect you to be civil in return. As far as the girls are concerned, you are their mother, and I will be their loving father. Just don't bring your boyfriends around my house, I said. There's never been any boyfriends, and there never will be. Ever, she said. Ever is a long time, Sally, I replied. Sally recovered after a fashion and lived in the little house on the estate with the girls until they went to university. Cancer took her a couple of years ago now. I don't think she really had it in her to fight that hard. I'm convinced the drugs she took in that overdose left her with some permanent damage. Being married in the end, do we love each other? Well, I don't think I love Beatrice in the same way I loved Sally. Beatrice and I are kind of soulmates. We're very fond of each other, and we enjoy making love to each other. I suppose it is love, but not the same kind of love. The twins are grown and married now. They have children of their own. Beatrice has been designated grandma, a title I believe she thinks she's too young to hold. Am I happy now? Yes and no. What's that? I could have lived my life out with the woman I loved. Now, I can only put flowers on her grave. Beatrice waits at the gate of the cemetery every Sunday whilst I do so. Life goes on.